Are you an overwhelmed SaaS founder ready to make the leap from leading a team to leading an organization? Join us each week as we refill your think tank with actionable tips and strategies from great business minds you know and those you don't know yet. This is SaaS Fuel with your host, 5-time entrepreneur, SaaS founder, and globetrotting adventurer, Jeff Maines.
Welcome back to the SaaS Fuel podcast, where we talk about everything under the sun except for the weather. Because, that's just too predictable. I'm your host, Jeff Maines. I help B2B SaaS founders like you scale from 7 figures to 8 and 9 figures ARR so that you create premium valuation, impact, and enjoy the freedom of running your business instead of your business running you. Well, we probably should talk about things under the sun. It's mid-March and all here in the US, and that means that it is time for spring break. Great time for fun in the sun and certainly a precursor to summer. Some places it's a really big deal and others, it's just a week of not doing much. I remember in my younger days when we returned from school after spring break, the teacher would ask, what everybody did. And I was amazed at some of the stories. I didn't know you could go to Disneyland on spring break. We didn't do that. When I was a teen, a group of friends went skiing a few years in a row over spring break. And I'm kind of a terrible skier. Actually, I could say I'm an okay skier. I'm a terrible stopper, which is one of those things that's kind of required if you're going to be a good skier. I could ski somewhat in control and get up and get some good speed. The problem was that speed just kept increasing going downhill. So at first, I would get going so fast I would fall, and that wasn't a great experience. And so then instead of that, when I got going too fast, then I would just sit down and slow down or stop. I don't think that's how it's supposed to work, but it was certainly comical. And I think mostly trial and error and listening to my friends a little bit. I didn't go to ski school. I was way too cool for that. At least I pretended I was anyway. I really just didn't want to go by myself. I thought that would be kind of weird, but I probably would have been much better and enjoyed it more if I had. If I'd actually asked for help and received some expert input and followed a structure of some sort instead of getting up a bunch of speed and falling down or sitting down. But hey, at least I've never fallen off the chairlift. My business journey has been like that at times as well. I didn't want to admit that I needed help, some expert guidance, or someone else to bounce ideas off of. But once I got over myself and stopped pretending I was too cool, my business life really changed in a big way, much better than skiing. That was an aha moment for me and something that I've continued to do. I still have coaches to this day. Some I work with regularly, literally weekly, monthly. I have a few that I work with quarterly and some specialists that we just do one focused day a year and continue to do that. And sometimes it's the same. Sometimes it's a different person that we do that with. But, focused days. Super, super helpful. But it's just a constant cycle of improvement. Growth is one area where you never want to slow down and you certainly don't want to fall down. And having those coaches there keeps you from falling and gives you some of that structure. So are you one of those that tries to figure it out and work it on yourself? Or do you like working with the pros and finding a shortcut to the path that gets you where you want to go? Just curious. Drop me a note. Let me know. Which one are you? Entrepreneurs, I think a lot of us try and do it ourselves. Our sponsor today is Champion Leadership Group. Get free growth tools and map out a plan to scale your SaaS business from 7 to 8 to 9 figures. Travel with fellow SaaS entrepreneurs on your growth journey using a proven methodology that is mentor-guided, results-focused, and peer-supported. Celebrate wins and quickly rebound from those nasty old setbacks. Learn to do the right thing at the right time to achieve profitable growth, impact, and freedom. Unleash that growth for you and your company at championleadership.com. Our expert guest last week was Sarah Noel Block. Sarah is an inbound marketing expert and host of the Tiny Marketing Show. Like many businesses, she was a marketing department of one, which is why it's Tiny Marketing, but it's never small in impact. So she shared her best ideas to turn a small marketing department, even if it's just you, shared tips to turn that into a virtual army and giant magnet bringing those inbound leads. It's such a great episode. Really had a good time with Sarah. And our founder last week was Nathan Lotka. A lot of you guys know Nathan, founder at Founder Path, a company that has provided non-diluted capital to SaaS founders. And in fact, in the last 12 months, Founder Path has given 175 SaaS founders over $100 million in capital. That's pretty awesome. So I'll be hanging with Nathan later this week at SaaS Open, and I hope to see you there as well. It is this Thursday and Friday, and last time I looked, there were still, 6 or 8 tickets left. And if at all possible, you should go meet up with another 1,000 SaaS founders. It's going to be a great, great time. Our current guest this week is Steve Benson, CEO and founder of Badger Maps. It is the #1 app on the App Store for outside salespeople to upgrade existing CRMs with mapping, routing, and scheduling. Very cool. Steve is also the founder of Badger Sales University and host of Outside Sales Talk, which is a podcast specifically for outside salespeople. He is a guy that does all things sales. So welcome a true sales badger who knows how to map his way to success, Steve Benson. Hey, Steve, welcome to SaaS Fuel.
I'm excited to be here.
Well, tell me a little bit about your journey and how you came up with the idea for Badger Maps.
Well, I guess we've been around for about 11 years now, started in 2012, and it's almost 2023. So my last role was I was at Google working on some mobile stuff, some mapping stuff. So I was really familiar with a lot of the tools and platforms that you would use to solve the problem that we ended up solving, which was very helpful to have from the beginning. The problem that we solve, we help field salespeople organize their time in the field. We connect to their CRMs. We can bring all of their customer information into like a mapping and routing environment, help them make decisions on where they're going to focus. So imagine like med device sales reps deciding which doctors they're going to focus on and building a route for their day to see 7 doctors on next Thursday. I guess the reason, the background on this is I had some background in field sales, and then I had background in these platforms, and so it was I understood the problem that the customer that we were and the prospect that we were going to be selling this to. I understood what their issue was, and then I also understood the tools to build the solution. That kept us calibrated in the beginning on solving the right problem for the right people. Started the company in 2012. It took us probably 5-ish years to get to $1 million a year in revenue. Another 5 to get to 5 million.
So what was it with that inflection point? What changed at that point that caused the spike?
The product worked a lot better. I think you start when you really start creating enough value, it takes a while, because we were bootstrapped, right? So we didn't have a big engineering team to really apply to the problem. So it was slow to solve enough of the problem and solve well enough that people really wanted to buy it when they looked at it. And right around 2017, the product worked. It didn't fall over. It did enough things. We were putting the customers on the map. You could build a route. You can optimize it. And that's the core thing that we set out to do. We were doing effectively after 5 years. Mapping is a relatively complex problem. It's not the easiest stuff to do. I guess that was really the inflection point. People start telling their friends, and you start getting a lot of people reaching out to you who are much more qualified. Sales cycles compress. They already know you're good because their buddy told them about you, and so I think that it makes things a lot easier and faster. So and I think that's probably true of a lot of software companies. It takes a while to get the train out of the station, but then once the train's chugging along, it gets a lot easier from there.
I love that. And I love bootstrap companies as well. I think it's a really smart way to do that. How did you decide to bootstrap or fund the company versus go out and do a big raise?
Well, I think, and this is a controversial statement, I would say most software companies are not a good fit for venture capital and a big raise. The reason I think that is because the way the economics of a venture capital fund work, they really need you to be a potential home run, meaning a 500 million to 5 billion exit. And most SaaS businesses aren't solving a problem that one day is going to be worth $1 billion. It's rare to be a unicorn, right? What you don't want to do is bring in an investor who has control of the company, and investors they don't always take control of the company, meaning they can hire and fire the CEO on the first round, but by the second round, they generally have control of the company. You don't want someone with control of the company who's inherently not aligned with you. If they need it to be $1 billion exit to make sense for them, the problem you're solving is more niche and going to be worth $100 million. They're going to need to shift or pivot what you're doing or change what you're doing a bit. Sometimes take some risks that you wouldn't have wanted to take or do things that they'll risk the business going to zero to get that outsized return. That's not in the best interest of a lot of software companies because, if you are bootstrapped and haven't sold, most of the company to private investors, you're often, creating a $100 million company is a huge win. Whereas, that's a pretty good day. They might consider that to be a loss, right?
Yeah.
Because their economics, so many of their investments go to zero that they need the ones that do survive to return their funds and help them get that 2 to 5x return on their fund over 10 years. So it's not good to trick investors into thinking that you're going to be a unicorn if you're not going to be a unicorn. Because especially in the early stages of this business, I didn't think that it was going to be a $1 billion company. And so, so far I've been right. We make $5 million a year, right? It's not $1 billion company. And so, yeah,
still pretty good.
It's better than a sharp stick in the eye, but it's 10 years in. So if we had brought in venture money, that wouldn't have been considered a win by their standards. And so, maybe they would have killed it. Maybe they would have, done things that I wouldn't have liked. What the direction that I went instead of raising venture money was I raised debt capital. And there are a handful of businesses now who are lenders to the SaaS industry who are a really good fit. And there's banks make loans, but not to unprofitable companies. So you have to be profitable to get a bank loan. That's not because they're mean. That's just the way banks are regulated.
Just their economics.
Well, it's laws. They're not allowed to take risks, but they're not allowed to take risks on lending to unprofitable businesses. I think is the way the laws are kind of structured. I think that was Sarbanes-Oxley. I'm not totally clear on that, but anyway, banks aren't going to give you a loan unless you're profitable. So basically, with the exception of if you have a ton of money sitting in capital in the bank. So like Silicon Valley Bank will give you a loan if you've taken on $5 million in venture and it's all sitting in the bank. They can give you a loan with that kind of backing it up, and also a handshake from the venture capitalist being like, hey, you're not going to lose money on this. But they wouldn't just give me a loan without a venture capitalist, right? And without $5 million or so laying around.
Right.
It gets the question, why do you need a loan if you've already got $5 million sitting around? Why would you take out a loan? But anyway, so banks don't work, and there's a bunch of lenders, just general small business lenders. They're not the best fit for this because they don't really understand the model, and so someone who really understands what SaaS is and how it works and what the economics are and what the levers are, they're able to get more comfortable with the risk and make a loan for a cheaper price. Organizations like ScaleWorks, I think they're called Element Finance now, Lighter Capital and Founder Path. Organizations like that are really set up to loan to SaaS businesses. My current loan is with Founder Path. I've got about a $2.25 million loan with them at this point. But those guys are kind of set up for the model and set up to loan to this business. The first loan I took out was back in, probably 2015, 2016 from Lighter Capital. And that was only like, $125K or something. But the amount of debt they'll give you raises as your revenues raise because you're able to service more debt. And so I definitely leveraged debt to be able to make investments. And the way to figure out if you're a good candidate for that, I think, is look at the investments you're going to make. Hey, I'm going to hire one person in marketing, 2 people in sales, and 2 engineers with this. And you can kind of ask yourself, well, if I hire these assets, over the next year, are they going to produce more revenue? Am I going to be making more money because I have these assets that I'll be able to pay off this debt with that extra money coming in? And, different investments kind of pay off in different ways. I think engineering investments pay back at the highest rate, but over a longer term. Investments in like lead generation or sales, kind of middle term, and then marketing, it can be the fastest return time, but probably the lowest overall in terms of like looking at it from a net present value perspective. You probably get the least out of marketing, the most out of engineering. But from a return on investment over a given period of time, you probably get the most bang for your buck out of marketing. versus an engineer. Imagine how long it takes you to monetize a feature that an engineer built versus, spending an extra 10 grand a month on Google ads that if experimented and you're spending in the right places, you're putting, 10 grand on the top of the funnel and 15 grand's coming out the bottom. So, that kind of pays for itself right away.
Right. Oh, that's good. And as you've continued to build out your team, how have you looked at that in, 70 people now? How did you build out your leadership team? And at what point do you think that makes the most sense?
Well, it kind of depends what kind of resources you have access to, right? If you have raised venture, you can bring in leaders early on, right? If you've got $5 million in the bank, and if you follow the path like, hey, I'm making $1 million a year, just raised an A round for $7 million, you hire your VP of marketing and your VP of sales, your VP of product, and your VP of eng right then. But if you're bootstrapped, you probably follow more of like a grow your own strategy. And at $1 million a year, you don't have all those things because at $1 million you can only afford people to do the actual work. You can't afford people to manage the actual work, or manage the people that are doing the actual work. So you'd rather have 3 people on your marketing team, at $2 million a year. You'd rather have 3 people in your marketing team than one person managing who's like a VP level that costs the same as the 3 people that do the actual work, managing no one. So if the choice is between having someone who's doing the work or having someone who manages people that do the work, you'd want them to do the work. Sometimes you can grow those people into leadership positions later on as the team scales. I think it's important to think about, the structure of the team early on is often a business co-founder and a technical co-founder. And those 2 people kind of organize the different sides of the organization. And they wear the leadership hats. On the technical side, they're the VP of product, the VP of eng, VP of quality assurance. And then on the business side, they're playing the role of often CEO, and also VP of sales, VP of marketing, COO, CFO, running CSAs. On the business side, I think it's important as you think about leadership. I think you don't want to bring it in too soon and you don't want to bring it in too late. You kind of need a few people doing the job. And this is especially true of any customer-facing role. You need a few of the people that do the actual work and are interacting with customers who are reporting to someone who has a lot of power in the company early on, because that helps you keep the company calibrated. If someone who really has a seat at the table, one of the co-founders needs to be very close to customers to keep the business calibrated, meaning solving the right problems for the right people, features added in the right order, stuff that a VP of product would be in charge of kind of figuring out later. But, if you don't have one yet, then make it, or being very close. If you do have one, and that is an area that you invested in early, then making sure that the person is really in touch and speaking. If the people that are either the CSAs, customer success associates, if the people that are speaking with your actual customers, if they don't have direct conversations with someone who has control, kind of guiding the direction of steering the ship of the company, you can end up sailing, 5 degrees off the way your course actually should be, which, over time it ends up being a very big difference. If you keep sailing in slightly the wrong direction, over time you end up way off. Especially if you're using outside funding and you're going real fast in that direction, you can end up way off course. Tactically, what this means is you've got to, before you hire a VP of customer success or a VP of sales, you want a couple people up and running successfully in that role, reporting to someone who's at the top of the company.
Yeah, so you're not so disconnected. You don't have those layers.
And you want to put those layers in place, after you've got them up running successful. Your first hire in sales isn't a VP of sales. The founder is the first salesperson or one of the founders. And then, and if you don't have someone who can really sell on the founding team, you probably got to bring someone in, or at least, and as a co-founder, or at least really listen to them. A lot of our startups die because they don't listen to the person who's really talking to the customers.
Yeah, so that happens a lot.
You want to get a couple people up and running successfully, and then bring in that layer to manage them and scale. And the timing around that is once you're ready to scale that team. So I'm not going to have 3 sales reps or 2 sales reps anymore. I'm going to hire the next 5. Before you hire the next 5, you bring in leadership on that team, and they help you scale it.
Well, as you've built out your team, one of the roles that you've continued to function in is a CFO. Especially thinking about the funding of the company. As you've used debt what are the gotchas, or what are things that you wish you'd known that you know now?
Yeah, I know that this is important, right? So I guess there are some gotchas with debt, and there's not a ton for a CFO to do at a company like this because we don't have outside investors, so I don't have to do a ton of like reporting or there's not a lot of CFO work to do
Sure.
if you're not raising and you don't have outside investors to kind of give care and feeding to.
That's a benefit in itself.
That is
just the simplicity, right?
You have to have the skills to manage your cash flow and project out, hey, what do the next 3 years look like in terms of what we're spending and what we're going to earn, so you can balance who you're hiring and decide where to make investments and stuff. And a CFO is really very helpful for that. But it's definitely an area that you don't need a CFO as a new startup. There's just not that much that's complicated going on the financial side. And debt's pretty straightforward. There are some gotchas with it that you do have to watch out for. There can be kind of onerous terms in the contract, right? And if you're going with one of the really high quality debt providers that are focused on SaaS, this isn't going to be a problem. But there's a lot of like quickie lenders out there that are kind of scuzzy and expensive. A lot of lenders, I guess one gotcha is a lot of lenders don't put things in terms of that you can understand, in terms of like figuring out, well, what does this actually cost? Like they talk a lot about like factor rates, or they've got a lot of ways of giving loans that doesn't sound like a mortgage. and what do I mean by that? So they give you the terms of what you're going to pay back, like, revenue-based loans. If someone's giving you money and you're paying them for a period of time afterwards, then it's a loan and you can convert it to an annual percentage rate, just like, a home loan for a mortgage, right? And it can be tricky to do, especially if it's like the amount you're paying back, like in a revenue-based loan, it's always changing. That's difficult to do. It's difficult to figure out what is the ROI. That's one trick. You're thinking about things in terms of their ROI. That's your APR. Your annual percentage rate is their return on their invested capital. So you got to figure out what is their ROI and convert to something you can understand, which is like a percentage rate, an APR, an annual percentage rate that you're paying. So that's one gotcha, is just making sure that you're not getting ripped off and being able to compare apples to apples. You have to like be able to figure out what's the annual percentage rate on this loan. And you can do that in Excel. And it's tricky with revenue-based loans because you have to be able to predict what your revenue is going to be, because they're going to take a percentage of the revenue to pay back their loan. Those end up being real expensive if you grow faster than expected, but real cheap if you end up growing slower than expected. So that there's, that, which can be a good thing. So I'm not saying all revenue-based loans are a bad idea or anything, because, it can end up really working in your favor. If I had taken a revenue-based loan, we sell to field salespeople, right? So COVID was real bad for us because all of a sudden people weren't in the field. We lost 40% of our customers in 2020 in not a very long period of time. And then it took us a while to get them all back, right? So if I had taken a revenue-based loan in January of 2020, that would have ended up being a real cheap loan for me, because they would have looked at my current revenues and been like, okay, so we're going to give you this loan. You're going to pay us this percentage of your revenues every month until it's paid back. That would have ended up being a real cheap loan because our revenues then promptly dropped. But, if I had taken a revenue-based loan in January of 2022, it would have ended up being really expensive because we've grown really well this year. So the timing there is tricky. But the easiest, most simple loans are just like, hey, we're going to give you this much money, and you were going to give us this constant money paid back over this amount of time. So over 36 months or over 48 months, you're going to make a $70,000 payment every month, and we're going to give you $1.5 million at the beginning of this. And you can figure out what the annual percentage rate is on that. You asked about gotchas. So I guess one of the important gotchas is, can you get out of the loan? Some loans will make it expensive, or there'll be penalties when you leave. Those are almost always negotiable out. So meaning you should be able to refinance your debt, right?
Yeah.
So what does that look like? It's like a term in there that says, hey, if you refinance the debt, or if you have to pay all the interest that we would have made had you stayed the entire time. That's a real bad term. If you want to pay back the debt early, you have to pay a penalty of $50,000. That's a real bad term. And those are almost always negotiable out. And you got to read contracts real carefully. Anyone that deals professionally in money, you have to be real careful with, right? Because they've got lots of little terms to screw you. So they professionally
Certainly written in their favor.
They wrote the contract, right? And so you have to be very careful crawling in bed with anyone who professionally deals with money. So you got to read the contracts real carefully. But most of the terms that really screw you are negotiable, and you just got to make sure that you catch them. But that's one of the key ones to watch for is there a penalty to leave? Because you should be able to, if someone else offers you a better deal on debt, you refinance the loan, which just like if you're refinancing your house, same concept, right? Like, so you owe $500,000 more, so someone pays off the $500,000 and now you owe them a $500,000 loan. But if there was a penalty on the first one of $200,000, then you might not want to do that because that's real expensive.
Right,
you gotta pay it up front. So yeah, I once actually had a loan like that with a nasty little penalty term in it. And what I did to wiggle out of that situation was I renegotiated a bigger loan. I got a new loan from them that was bigger, and so I basically refinanced the smaller loan with them. In the process of that refinance, negotiated out that one term that I had missed the first time. There was like a penalty clause, and so then I had a bigger loan with them with no penalty clause, and then I refinanced them away with another company that was a better deal.
That's a really smart way to do that. Yeah, paying attention to the terms is so important. So those were some things that were really not available even 10 years ago when you started. What other changes have you seen in the SaaS space over the last 10 years? How is it different now than it was when you started?
Well, yeah, financing is definitely different. I think the venture industry has changed. Cloud computing has changed. I think a lot of things have gotten a lot easier. I think there's a lot of software supporting software companies now because it's I think there is some level of bias in the investment community towards solving problems and just the software community towards solving their own problems because they know how to scratch their own itch, right? And so I think it's easier to get funded if you're scratching the itch that software companies have because the investors understand it. They're like, oh yeah, I have portfolio companies that have this very problem, in a way that it's harder to get funded if you're solving a problem for pharmaceutical companies because the venture capitalists might not work with pharma. They don't have as much experience in pharma. Yeah,
they don't get it.
So what's the problem when you're putting the stuff in pills? I don't get it. Like, whereas if you're like, yeah, so I'm having this helps me with SEO like this, and this. And they're like, oh, I understand that problem because all my company, I've invested in lots of companies with that problem. So I think there's a lot of software today that helps you with all the problems that software companies have. I think software has gotten a lot better. It's just less buggy. I mean, we've had 10 years to work on it, right? So a lot of problems have gotten solved. Like CRMs used to really suck. Now they're really pretty solid, right? If you were using a CRM in 2008, it was probably a pretty painful experience. I remember being on Siebel when I was at IBM in 2006, and now that was pretty painful, right? And then now there's a bunch of cloud CRMs.
And that was one of the best out there too at the time. I mean, they were like the flagship,
they were the gold standard, right? They're the one IBM
and it was
picks
bad
to use, so they figured they had their pick of the litter. And Salesforce was a small startup at that time, so I think just software in general has come a really long way. So that changes a lot. The cloud and the tools that are available to us, the phones have gotten so much stronger. When I started Badger, we're a mapping application that runs on the phone, right? The phones weren't fast enough to run the first version of Badger. So the iPhone in 2012 couldn't run our software. We needed to do it on an iPad. And obviously today the phones are, I don't know, 1,000,000 times better. I'm not sure how much more powerful they are, but they're a lot more powerful. It's staggering, Moore's law, et cetera. But
right.
These devices are incredibly powerful now and can very easily run our software. The platforms are better, the software is better, the tools are better. I think the world understands. No one knew what the word SaaS meant then if they were like, an investor in Iowa. But today everyone understands this stuff and it's a really important part of our economy and the whole industry has really matured.
What's been some of the biggest surprises you've had in building Badger Maps?
I think it's always surprising how hard everything is. starting any business, but certainly a technology business. I think there's a lot of challenges that come up. It's always surprising how bad certain things work. Try to send a check on the banking website, and you're like, wow, this doesn't work that well. It's not really there are a lot of problems, I think, and challenges that around starting a company. It's hard to hire great people. It's always surprising. I guess I'm always surprised at how many random applications there are to technology too. Like 3 of our biggest customers aren't even field sales teams, and which is surprising, right? They're more like field service teams that are gathering data and need to make decisions about what they're going to do in the field. They behave like field salespeople in my mind, but they're really they do something slightly different. And it's surprising to me how many applications there are to the problem that we solve, and yet people are still able to find us. That's something we're working on from a marketing perspective right now. Like who are all you people? Where do we find you? Who else behaves like this?
I think that's always the challenge. Just identifying, who is that, especially when you get outliers, and then you get a few outliers, and you're like, well, is this a market, or is this truly an outlier?
Yeah, and they're this particular company is doing things in this particular way, and you do sort of creep into other software spaces, right? Like there is field service software, which is different than field sales software because service people work differently than salespeople. Salespeople don't have inventory problems and parts problems, and they don't have an amount of time that they need to do a job, this job versus that job in the field. They're not swappable. You can't just have this plumber. You can have this plumber fix a sink, or any of these 10 plumbers. Depends who's closest. That's field services. Field sales is like, well, this account belongs to the salesperson, so they're the person that has to go visit them.
There's a relationship.
Absolutely, yeah. So there's differences in these different situations, and sometimes you'll find people in this adjacent industry that end up behaving like the people that you originally solved the problem for, and that you got to figure out, well, is this worth me going after this group of people, and should I prosecute it? What else has been surprising? I just launched a new product this year. I've been surprised how easy that is when you already have a whole team that can manage each piece of it. And I think 5 million is a little early to be launching new products, but this one we were particularly well suited for because it's a training product for salespeople. So it's kind of like masterclass video, the masterclass video platform, but it's all the videos are sales training videos.
Okay.
So it's called Badger Sales University. That's very adjacent to our original product because, same users, I guess more people than just field salespeople can use it. Any kind of salesperson, retail, inside, whatever could use it. But all of our existing customers can upsell to it. Because of my hobbies, I have a sales podcast called Outside Sales Talk, and I bring on sales experts and interview them on different areas of sales. That kind of marketing / hobby that I do, I know all, 200 field sales experts. It was easy for me to gather their videos and create a platform with it because I already know them. That was an easy product for us to get going because, it was a natural extension really. But I do think in general, 5 million is a little early to be doing that. But I guess I was surprised at how well it worked and how easy that was for us to kind of get going. And there's a lot of growth in it. We've got a lot to do still, obviously, but we were able to spin it right up.
That's good, especially because it is so adjacent to what you do. It's not something that's completely outside of that. You've got existing customers that need that as well. So it just makes like a really good transition.
That's a great way to think about new products and services you're creating. It's like if you look at your existing customer base and you've got 7,000 customers or something, and you're like, well, yeah, I mean, these guys all kind of need this. So if I'm able to sell it to 15% of them, then this whole project just pays for itself, and then I'll be selling it going forward. So, but it cost me nothing, and I could also sell it to all these people, which is fantastic. So, that initial cross sell is a great rubric to kind of hold up. Like, should I do this or not? It's like, well, how long? If I know that a bunch of the people that I'm already doing business with are just going to upsell into this, then that makes it make a lot of sense. And it's a cheap thing.
Much easier decision.
It's like $29 a month for all you can eat sales training videos. It's attractive to a lot of our customers. We can just show it to them and be like, hey, try it out for free for a month. Kick the tires if you enjoy it. Press if you enjoy it when we take it away from you at the end of the month, press the button to start paying for it. So that made a lot of sense. So I guess that was surprising.
Yeah, that's good. A little product-led growth there. So with your experience in sales, what are some sales myths, or where do companies miss it when it comes to sales?
This is one of my favorite topics. Sales. uh, I'd say.
Are there any sales myths, or do we have it all correct all the time?
No, we are wrong about a lot of things. I think one good one is the coaching and development of salespeople is something that gets done at the annual training as opposed to all the time. I think that's a nice one. Even if your VP of sales wouldn't say that, that's actually how they behave. But actually, I think you should be up leveling and coaching your team at all times. Especially in times of a difficult economy like we have right now, right? I think a sales manager should be spending about half their time coaching their team. This isn't just like, classroom learning, but this includes pre-call strategizing, post-call debriefing, doing joint calls, ride-alongs, could be, coaching on a specific opportunity. Anything that makes your reps better counts towards that 50% rule of thumb. I think you want to be coaching things like negotiation and what needs to be coached, of course, depends on the team and depends on the industry. There's how do you defend your margins? That's something, negotiation type training. That's always an important thing to think everybody can freshen up on. Building pipeline is a great thing to think about. Coaching people, especially in a tough economy. We often need to relearn to prospect and rethink who we're selling to in a bad economy. There are a bunch of others, like, field sales is going away is one of my favorites because I'm in field sales. Mm-hmm. I make a product for field salespeople, but that's a good myth I hear a lot. Like people are like, oh, do people even do that anymore? And I'm like, yeah, we have 7,500 companies doing that use our product. It certainly is not dying or going away, especially during COVID. That was, I swear half the people I talked to that were friends of mine were like, oh, I was worried about you. I totally thought you'd be out of business. And I'm like, no, we're still here. Not that COVID didn't hurt, but I mean, post-COVID, I mean, face-to-face meetings are really important to lots of different types of sales. They shorten sales cycles, they deepen relationships, and I think they're always going to be important. That's a good myth, but that's going away. People are like, oh, because of Zoom. And I'm like, well, we've always had the phone. We've always been able to talk to people in that type of way. Right. Seeing your cute little face in a square on my screen doesn't change that much about the interaction. It's a phone or an internet interaction is always clunky and awkward compared to an in-person meeting where you can really connect and really understand your customers' problems better, I think, in person. And I don't know why that is. I guess people thrive off social interaction. And you kind of tap into something that makes us human when you're with someone that you don't get over the phone from a relationship perspective.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Yeah, there's a bunch of.
So how do you think sales has changed and evolved, say, over the last 4 or 5 years? And how do you think it's continuing to change going forward?
One of the biggest changes in the industry are they're technologically driven. A lot of stuff, it's surprising what hasn't changed. Even with all the technology that we have. Like if you read sales coaching books from 1917, it's all still, understand your customer's problem, listen to them, map your solution to it after you really understand them, build a relationship, be useful, be helpful. I think a lot of stuff has not changed. But the things that really probably have changed the most are the ways we reach people, email messaging and all the technology that we use today that we didn't used to have. That's driving the biggest changes. How can we communicate with people? I think the internet changes a lot of things. People do a lot of research before they engage with a prospect or customer. I think all the review sites really changed the way people buy. They can hear from 200 of the people who have already tried your product at the touch of a button. So your product better be good, because if it sucks, people are going to talk about on the internet how it sucks. So in the research people are able to do today versus, when I started my career is really, really huge. I think it's a more transparent world. Yeah, those are the key changes I think that I see.
So where can people find out more about you and about Badger Maps online?
If you just go to our website, badgermapping.com, you can Google us. That's probably the best place to learn about the product if you have a field sales team. If you're interested in learning more about sales, my podcast is a great free resource. It's specifically geared towards field salespeople for obvious reasons. But so I kind of bring on these sales experts and have them teach what they teach from the perspective of understanding that the listeners are field salespeople and managers of field sales teams. So that's called outside sales talk. Badger Sales University is the sales training product. You can just Google that. If you have a sales team that you want, we have a free trial. I think Steve 80, all uppercase Steve and then 80, same word, is a 80% off code for that. If like first month's free and then 80% off the second month. Reaching me personally, LinkedIn's probably the best way. And my LinkedIn's kind of a nightmare for me right now. So much reaching out going on that today, but that's probably still the best place to get a hold of me is just do the search for Steve Benson, Badger Maps. I'll pop right up. But that's probably the best place to find to actually get a hold of me personally.
And we'll make sure and link all of those, especially the podcast and Badger University in the show notes. And we'll make sure to have the code in there as well. Where did the name come from? Where did Badger Maps? Why Badger?
Reasons. The biggest reason was that I went to the University of Wisconsin, and so I am a Badger.
There you go.
But I wanted to pick an animal or some other like kind of memorable noun to name the company. I think nouns are great for names. I don't like it when people use adjectives, and you can really picture. Now, I don't think Badger was the best name in the world because a lot of people don't know what a badger is. I mean, growing up in the Midwest, I feel like, I thought this was like an obvious, one of the biggest North American mammals, right?
You would think, right?
But you go to like California and people are like, what's a badger? Like, my wife thought that a badger was, what did she think it was? A beaver. She thought badgers were beaver. She's like, we were together for at least 2 years before she figured that one out. She's like, oh, well, they like make houses in the water. And I'm like, no, they don't.
Exactly the same, only completely different.
Animal. So, yeah, apparently people that aren't from the Midwest don't know what a badger or a wolverine or a pine marten are, but they're important North American animals, and everyone should get to know them. They're very cool. The honey badger was enjoying some really good press at the time in 2011 when I was thinking about company names. So that helped a lot because everyone kind of really had a positive association with really funny honey badger video that was one of the most viral videos of 2011, I think. We've all seen it at this point, I would hope, but hysterical. He's like, this nasty ass little badger, and he's running around killing things, and it's great video. So I was looking for a noun. I basically wanted to name the company some animal, and I had a personal affiliation with badger, and then. Although I would recommend China, now that we've gone international, you want to pick a name that internationalizes well, which is tricky because you got to think about Asia, you got to think about Europe, and Badger does not internationalize well. Even in Western languages, the DG is like, huh? and no one knows what it is. So, because, except in like England and Scotland and Australia, they know exactly what a badger is, which is strange. And nobody knows what a badger is like the English. They love badgers over there. Can't explain why, but that's what it is.
That's good. At least you get to educate them as to what it is, and you own that in that market if they don't even know what it is.
That's right. Well, it'd be memorable if they did know what it was. If I could do it all again, I might have picked a fox or a skunk or something that kind of everybody understands what it is. Like
skunk maps.
A squirrel, but squirrels are tricky. They don't like you talk about squirrels to Australians, and they're like, "A what?" They don't have squirrels in Australia. So you got a koala. Yeah. I mean, I feel like there's these key animals that everybody knows what it is. Pandas. So if you're pick a noun that everybody knows, don't do what I did.
That's good. I like Badger Maps. I think that's good.
Appreciate it.
Steve, really enjoyed having you on the show. Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. And let me know if I can be helpful.
Thanks again, Steve, for coming on the show and sharing your journey and insights. You can learn more about Steve and Badger Maps at badgermapping.com. As always, all links, highlights, resources, full show notes are available at saasfuel.com, including a link to Steve's Badger Sales University. You should definitely go check that out. Please subscribe, follow us, or leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. You can do all of that at saasfuel.com. And everyone who subscribes this week gets a set of, we'll say, some bent ski poles. How about that? It's about the best I could do with my ski career. Well, join us next time on our SaaS Fuel Expert series for a conversation with John Dougherty, serial entrepreneur and founder of Credo and Editor Ninja. Going to be a great conversation. Credo's been an amazing idea to help with the question of how do I find a good marketing agency? Fills a really important need. It's easy to use and helps solve many issues in finding the right marketing agency to work with. And our founder next week is Osa Asarenko. He is a 3-time founder and former co-founder of Fifth Star Funds VC. He's applying lessons from the tech and finance world to create demonstrable impact on restaurant operations and sustainability. Curious to learn more? It is a great episode, wonderful conversation. So come back next week. John on Thursday and Osa on next Tuesday. And until then, enjoy the journey.
Thanks for listening to SaaS Fuel. Full show notes for each episode, which includes a summary, key takeaways, quotes, and any resources mentioned, are available at saasfuel.com. Be sure to follow and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you're enjoying the content and getting value from these episodes, please leave us a rating and review at ratethispodcast.com/SaaSfuel. We'll be sure to read these out on future episodes.